Stop throwing away the leaves you already have sitting in your kitchen. You walk past them every single day. You use them in soup, maybe in a stew. Maybe you don't use them at all, and they sit in the back of your cupboard until they lose their smell. And the whole time, the most powerful thing in your kitchen for a body over 60 has been hiding in plain sight. You think you need a pharmacy. You think you need a prescription. You think the answer to the stiffness in your knees, the fog in your head, the swelling in your ankles, and the sleep that never quite comes. You think the answer to all of that has to be complicated, expensive, and prescribed by someone in a white coat. It isn't. It never was. There is one ordinary leaf. You can buy it for less than a cup of coffee. You drop it into hot water. You let it steep for 7 minutes. You drink it slowly. And if you do that every night for 7 days, something begins to happen inside the body of a person over 60 that most doctors will never sit down and explain to you because they don't have the 15 minutes it would take. Stay right here because the leaf, the exact amount, the right time of day, and the 7-day change you can expect, all of that is coming. But first, you need to understand what is actually happening inside your body after 60, because if you don't understand the problem, the leaf is just a leaf. Now, a quick introduction. The voice you are listening to belongs to a research narrator who has spent the last 15 years reading the cardiology and geriatric literature so that ordinary people, the people who actually need this information, can hear it in plain English. Not a sales pitch, not a miracle cure. Just what the studies actually say, translated into the language of a kitchen and a kettle. And here's the honest part. The reason this matters so much is that the body in question is not somebody else's body. It is the same body that wakes up at 3 in the morning with a stiff lower back. The same body that has watched its own numbers drift the wrong way on a blood panel. The same body that has, more than once, stood up too fast from a chair and had to grab the counter. This is not a lecture from the outside. This is a conversation between people who are living inside the same problem. So here is the reframe. Here is the part that almost nobody explains to you correctly. You think the problem is your age. You have been told in 100 small ways that the stiffness, the swelling, the slow mornings, the foggy afternoons, the restless nights, all of it is just getting older. Your doctor shrugs. Your family shrugs. You shrug. You accept it. You take another pill. You sit down a little longer. And the decline keeps going quietly 1 degree at a time. But the real problem is not your age. The real problem is something called chronic low-grade inflammation. And after 60, that quiet, smoldering fire inside the body is what is actually driving almost everything you blame on getting old. It is not the years. It is the fire. The joints hurt because the fire is in the joint lining. The brain feels slow because the fire has crossed into the brain. The blood vessels stiffen because the fire is in the vessel walls. The sleep is broken because the fire keeps the nervous system in a low alarm state all night long. You have been treating the smoke. You have been ignoring the fire. And that is why nothing has really worked. It is not because you did it wrong. It is not because you were lazy. It is not because you lack discipline. It is because no one explained the one missing step. That after 60, you have to put out the fire before any of the other advice can land. The walking, the stretching, the diet changes, the supplements, they all work better, much better, on a body that is not quietly burning from the inside. So now you understand the stakes, and the stakes are not small. Chronic inflammation in the over 60 body is linked in the published literature to nearly every condition that steals independence from older adults. It is in the conversation about heart disease, the leading cause of death in this age group. It is in the conversation about stroke, which kills or disables hundreds of thousands of older Americans every year. It is in the conversation about cognitive decline, the single thing your generation fears more than almost any other diagnosis. It is in the conversation about falls, and falls are not a small matter. 1 in 4 adults over 65 falls each year. Of those who fall and break a hip, a significant percentage never walk independently again. A fall is not just a fall. A fall is sometimes the beginning of the end of the life you built. That is the fear, and you need to feel it for a moment, because if you don't feel it, you won't act. But here is the relief, and you need to hear this just as clearly. You are not stuck. Your body, even at 65, even at 70, even at 78, is still listening. It is still responding. It is still capable of cooling the fire down. And one of the simplest, cheapest, most underused tools for doing exactly that is a leaf you can hold between 2 fingers and drop into a cup of hot water tonight. So here is what is coming. 7 leaves. 7 ordinary, almost embarrassingly ordinary leaves, ranked from the least powerful to the one that fewer than 3% of Americans over 60 are using correctly. Number 1 is the one that changed everything. Number 1 is the leaf where, in the studies, the markers of inflammation dropped the furthest, the fastest in people exactly your age. Number 1 is the leaf to stay for. Do not click away before number 1, because number 7 through 2 are useful, but number 1 is the one that is worth the entire 20 minutes of your time. Before we go in, do something small. In the comments, just type your age and the single symptom that bothers you the most. One word: knees, sleep, memory, swelling. That is all. It takes 5 seconds, and it helps the next person who finds this video know they are not alone. Now, leaf number 7, peppermint. Peppermint leaf contains a compound called menthol, along with a family of plant chemicals called rosmarinic acid. In the body, rosmarinic acid behaves like a small cleanup crew. It walks through the bloodstream and binds to the molecules that drive inflammation, the ones with names like histamine and leukotrienes, and it neutralizes them quietly, the way a sponge soaks up a spill on a counter before it can spread. Think of your bloodstream after 60 as a kitchen floor that has had a slow leak under the sink for years. You don't see the puddle. You just notice the floor is sticky everywhere you step. Rosmarinic acid is the mop. In one published trial out of a European nutrition journal, older adults who drank peppermint tea twice a day for 4 weeks showed a measurable drop in a key inflammation marker called C-reactive protein, around 12% on average. 12% does not sound dramatic, but on a body that has been smoldering for 20 years, 12% is the difference between waking up stiff and waking up moving. Dorothy, a retired schoolteacher in her early 70s from a small town outside Knoxville, had what her doctor called irritable bowel and what she called a stomach that never let her leave the house. She had tried everything: fiber, probiotics, 3 different prescriptions. Her daughter, a nurse, suggested she try peppermint tea, 1 cup after breakfast and 1 cup after dinner. Dorothy was skeptical. She said, "If a leaf could fix this, somebody would have told me 20 years ago." She tried it anyway. After 2 weeks, she called her daughter and said, "For the first time since I can remember, I went to church on a Sunday morning and I didn't have to plan my seat by the aisle." She cried on the phone. Here is how to use it: 1 teaspoon of dried peppermint leaf, or 1 tea bag of pure peppermint, in 8 ounces of water just off the boil. Steep it for 7 minutes covered, because the active oils evaporate if you don't put a lid on the cup. Drink it warm, not hot, and drink it slowly over about 10 minutes. Best window is right after a meal, never on a completely empty stomach if you have any history of reflux. That is leaf number 7. But leaf number 6 does something peppermint cannot do, because peppermint works on the gut and the blood. Leaf number 6 works on the place where your sleep actually begins. Leaf number 6. Lemon balm. Lemon balm is a member of the mint family, but it has a completely different job. The active compound is called rosmarinic acid again, but joined by something called citronellol. Together, these 2 molecules walk straight to a receptor in the brain called GABA, and they help it do its work. GABA is the brake pedal of your nervous system. When the brake pedal is working, your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, and your brain stops running through tomorrow's list at 11 o'clock at night. After 60, that brake pedal gets worn down. Lemon balm presses on it gently from the outside. Picture an old car with a sticky brake. You can still stop, but you have to push harder, and you arrive at every red light a little later than you should. Lemon balm is the mechanic that cleans the brake line. It does not knock you out. It does not drug you. It restores a function your body already had. A trial out of a sleep research center published a few years back found that older adults who took a standardized lemon balm preparation in the evening reported about a 44% reduction in self-rated nighttime anxiety, with measurable improvement in time to sleep. 44%. From a leaf. Raymond, in his mid-70s, a retired engineer living outside Tucson, had not slept through a full night in 9 years. He had tried prescription sleep medication. He hated the way it made him feel in the morning, like he was wading through wet sand until lunch. His wife handed him a cup of lemon balm tea one night and said, "Just try this, just for me." He drank it. He fell asleep at 10:30. He woke up at 5:45. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and he could not believe what had just happened. He told his wife it was the first time in almost a decade he had not heard the 3 a.m. clock. Here is how to use it: 1½ teaspoons of dried lemon balm leaf in 8 ounces of water just off the boil. Steep it for 10 minutes covered. Drink it warm 60 to 90 minutes before bed. Not earlier, not later. The window matters because the calming peak in the bloodstream lines up with the natural drop in body temperature that triggers sleep. But here's the next thing. Lemon balm calms the nervous system at night. Leaf number 5 does something during the day that almost nobody over 60 is doing. And it is the leaf that the heart, specifically, has been waiting for. Leaf number 5. Hibiscus. Technically, hibiscus is a flower petal, used the way a leaf is used, dropped into hot water and steeped. The active compounds are a family of pigments called anthocyanins, the same red and purple pigments that give blueberries and red cabbage their color. In the bloodstream, anthocyanins behave like little shields. They sit on the inside lining of your blood vessels, the lining that takes the most damage from years of high pressure and inflammation, and they help that lining stay flexible. Think of your arteries after 60 as a garden hose that has been left out in the sun for too many summers. The rubber gets stiff, it cracks, it loses the give it used to have. Hibiscus is a slow, patient hand rubbing oil back into that rubber, 1 cup at a time. In a well-cited trial out of a major American university, adults with mildly elevated blood pressure who drank 3 cups of hibiscus tea a day for 6 weeks saw their systolic blood pressure drop by an average of about 7 points. 7 points may not impress you, but 7 points, sustained, is the kind of number that changes the risk of stroke over the next 10 years in a meaningful way. Margaret, 75, a retired hairdresser from the Phoenix area, was on 2 blood pressure medications and still running numbers that worried her cardiologist. She did not stop her medications. She added one thing: 2 cups of hibiscus tea a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the early afternoon. 6 weeks later, her doctor looked at her chart, then looked at her and asked her what she had changed. She told him. He didn't roll his eyes. He wrote it down. Here is how to use it. 1 heaping tablespoon of dried hibiscus petals or 2 hibiscus tea bags in 12 ounces of water just off the boil. Steep for 10 minutes. Drink it warm or chilled in the afternoon if you prefer. Avoid hibiscus within 2 hours of taking blood pressure medication because the effects can stack. And if you are on any blood pressure medication at all, tell your doctor you are adding this. That is not a suggestion. That is a requirement. Now, hibiscus works on the pipes. Leaf number 4 works on the fluid moving through the pipes and on the swelling in your ankles you have been ignoring for the last 3 years. Leaf number 4. Dandelion leaf. Yes, the weed. The one your husband or your father spent a Saturday afternoon pulling out of the lawn. Dandelion leaf is one of the most underrated medicinal plants in any American backyard. It contains a compound called terexasterol, along with a high level of natural potassium. Together, they act on the kidneys as a gentle diuretic. But unlike the prescription water pills, dandelion leaf does not strip your potassium out with the water. It replaces what it takes. If your kidneys after 60 are a water treatment plant running on a tired night shift, dandelion leaf is the supervisor walking in with a cup of coffee and turning the lights back on. The plant keeps running. It just runs better. A small trial out of a botanical medicine journal found that participants who took dandelion leaf extract showed a measurable increase in urinary output within 5 hours of a single dose, with no drop in serum potassium. That second part is the important part. That is what makes it different. Helen, 74, a retired bookkeeper, used to look down at her ankles at the end of the day and not recognize them. Her shoes left grooves in her skin. Her rings did not come off easily. Her son, who reads a lot about natural remedies, brought her dried dandelion leaf and showed her how to brew it. 2 weeks later, she put on a pair of shoes she had not been able to wear in 18 months. She walked into her son's kitchen, lifted 1 foot, and said, "Look." He did look, and then he hugged her, because his mother had her ankles back. Here is how to use it. 1 teaspoon of dried dandelion leaf and 8 ounces of water just off the boil. Steep for 8 minutes. Drink 1 cup in the late morning, around 11, never in the evening, because you do not want to be up 3 times in the night. If you are on a prescription diuretic or a heart medication, talk to your doctor before adding this. The interaction is real. So far, the gut, the nervous system, the arteries, and the kidneys. 4 leaves, 4 systems. But leaf number 3 goes after the place where the fire actually starts. It goes after the joints. Leaf number 3. Nettle leaf. Stinging nettle. The plant that hurts you if you grab it in a field. Cooked or dried, it stops stinging. What it keeps is one of the richest profiles of plant minerals and anti-inflammatory compounds in the whole herbal world. It contains a substance that interrupts a specific inflammatory pathway in the joints, a pathway with a long name that you do not need to remember. What you need to remember is this. Nettle leaf turns down the volume on the signal that is making your knees ache when you stand up from the dinner table. Picture the inflammation inside an arthritic joint as a smoke alarm that has been screaming since 2010. Nettle leaf is not a hammer to the alarm. It is a small hand reaching up and gently turning the volume dial down, 2 clicks at a time, until you can hear yourself think again. A clinical study out of a European rheumatology group reported that older adults with osteoarthritis who used nettle leaf preparations daily for several weeks reported about a 53% reduction in self-rated joint pain compared to placebo. 53%. From a weed. Walter, 68, a retired high school baseball coach, had given up his Saturday morning walks because his knees would not let him go more than 2 blocks. He started drinking 2 cups of nettle tea a day. 3 weeks in, he walked 4 blocks. 6 weeks in, he walked to the end of his street and back twice in the morning air, and he told his wife when he got home that he had forgotten what it felt like to want to keep walking. Here is how to use it. 1 tablespoon of dried nettle leaf and 10 ounces of water just off the boil. Steep for 15 minutes covered because nettle is a tougher leaf and needs the time to release its minerals. Drink 1 cup in the morning and 1 cup in the early evening. Expect to feel something around the end of the second week, not the first day. The second week. Now press the like button before the next one. Just a tap. Do it now, because leaf number 2 is the one that works on the part of you that you are most afraid of losing. And number 1, after that, is the leaf that does what no other leaf on this list can do. Leaf number 2, Ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo is one of the oldest tree species on Earth. Its leaves contain 2 families of compounds, flavonoids, and terpenoids that act together on the smallest blood vessels in the body, the capillaries. After 60, those capillaries get narrower and stiffer, especially the ones feeding the brain. Less blood to the brain means slower word recall, slower decision-making, a heavier feeling behind the eyes by 3 in the afternoon. Ginkgo widens those tiny vessels gently and improves the flow of oxygen-rich blood into the brain tissue itself. Think of the blood supply to the brain as a network of country roads that have not been resurfaced in years. The traffic still moves, but it moves slowly, and it stops more often. Ginkgo is the road crew. It does not build new roads. It clears the ones you already have. In a major review of clinical trials, older adults who took standardized Ginkgo daily for several months showed measurable improvements in word recall and processing speed compared to placebo, with the strongest effect in adults over 70. Dorothy, a different Dorothy this time in her late 70s, a retired librarian, had started losing the word for ordinary things. Spoon, towel, the name of her neighbor's dog. She would stand in her kitchen and stare at a cabinet and the word would not come. She started a daily cup of Ginkgo tea in the morning. After about 5 weeks, her daughter noticed that her mother was finishing her sentences again. Dorothy noticed it too. She said it felt like a fog had lifted off the side of her head. Here is how to use it. 1 teaspoon of dried ginkgo leaf and 8 ounces of water just off the boil. Steep for 10 minutes. Drink 1 cup in the morning, with food, never on an empty stomach. And this one is important. If you take a blood thinner of any kind, including daily aspirin, do not use ginkgo without talking to your doctor first. Ginkgo affects clotting, and that interaction is not something to guess at. Which brings us finally to leaf number 1. Leaf number 1 is the leaf that combines, in a single plant, almost every benefit you have just heard about. It cools inflammation in the joints. It calms the nervous system. It supports the blood vessels. It helps the gut. And in the studies on older adults, it does something the other leaves on this list do not quite do. It acts on the cellular machinery itself, the small power stations inside every one of your cells, called mitochondria. After 60, those power stations get tired. They produce less energy. They produce more waste. They are, in a real sense, the root of the fatigue and the slow mornings and the feeling that you are running a body that needs a tune-up. Leaf number 1 is Tulsi. Holy basil. Tulsi is not the basil on top of an Italian dinner. It is its cousin, used for thousands of years in traditional medicine, and now studied in dozens of modern clinical trials. The active compounds include eugenol, ursolic acid, and a family of molecules called osimericides. Together, they act on the stress hormone cortisol, on the inflammatory pathway in the joints, on the inner lining of the blood vessels, and on the mitochondria themselves. 1 leaf, 4 systems at once. Think of Tulsi as the master electrician who walks into an old house and instead of replacing one bad outlet, checks the whole panel. He tightens the loose wires. He resets the breakers. He labels the ones that have been confusing the household for years. When he leaves, the lights are not just on. They are steady. In a clinical trial published in a respected journal of complementary medicine, older adults who took a standardized Tulsi preparation daily for 8 weeks showed reductions in cortisol, reductions in inflammatory markers, and self-rated improvements in energy, sleep, and general well-being. Across all categories. Not 1 or 2, all of them. This is Raymond again. But the second Raymond, 78, a retired postal carrier from a small town in eastern Tennessee. He came to Tulsi not because he believed in herbs, but because he had run out of patience with how he felt. Tired by noon, stiff by 3, asleep in his chair by 7, only to lie awake in bed at 1 in the morning. His granddaughter, who was studying nursing, brewed him a cup of Tulsi tea every evening for a week and asked him to just drink it without arguing. On the 7th day, he sat down at his breakfast table, looked at his wife of 51 years and said, "I feel like myself again." He did not cry. He smiled. He had not smiled at breakfast in 2 years. Here is how to use it. 2 teaspoons of dried Tulsi leaf, or 1 Tulsi tea bag, in 8 ounces of water just off the boil. Steep for 7 minutes, covered. Drink 1 cup in the morning and 1 cup about an hour after dinner. Do this for 7 days. Just 7. And on the morning of the 8th day, ask yourself one honest question. Do I feel different? Most people in this age group in the published reports say yes. Now you have the 7. And you might be sitting there wondering, if these leaves are this useful, why did nobody ever drink it for 7 nights? Just 7. That is your challenge. 7 cups, 7 evenings, 1 leaf. At the end of the 7th day, come back to this video and leave 1 comment. Just 1 phrase. Type, I feel different if you feel different. Type, still waiting if you don't. That is all. 1 phrase. Because someone else scrolling past this video next week is going to read your comment and decide whether to try it themselves. Your 7 days will help their 7 days. And one last thing. If there is a person in your life over 60, a parent, a spouse, a neighbor, an old friend, who has been quietly accepting decline as if it were the only option left, share this with them, not because you are trying to fix them, because you are trying to remind them that the body, even an aging body, is still listening, still responding, still capable of cooling the fire down, 1 cup of hot water at a time. You are not broken. You are not finished. You are not too old. You are a person with a kettle, a leaf, and 7 evenings ahead of you. That is more than enough to begin. Take care of your body. It is the only home you have.